What's up, everybody? We are back, and we're going to rock it old school today, by which I mean I did not bring my tripod, so you get to see my shaky camera phone. How exciting. John Delarose here. Delarose.com, that's DELARROZ.com. Head to the link in my description below, sign up for my newsletter, get a free graphic novel. Everybody wins. All right, this is Morbius, the Epic Collection, and this is Volume 1. There'll be a Volume 2 coming out later this year. When I record this video. This one covers his first appearances in Amazing Spider-Man 101 and 102, Marvel Team Up 3 and 4, Giant Size Superheroes number 1, Fear 20 through 26, which is not the whole magazines, but just the Morbius stories from those. And I guess those would be the whole magazines. I think there were backups in there too, but I'll have to look into that because those were pretty short stories. And material from Vampire Tales 1 through 8 and Giant Size Werewolf by Night number 4. Now those definitely did not have the other stories in there. We'll get into this right here. So this is a hodgepodge kind of collection of appearances that's character-based, and I know they're making a Morbius movie or whatnot, and that's probably the onus behind this. You get into the Amazing Spider-Man stuff, and this is one of the first issues where Peter grows extra arms and becomes a man spider. Ha ha ha. And it's a very fun issue. You also learn about Morbius's background in this. How he's a scientist out at sea. He's got a disease, and he's trying to find a cure. And unfortunately, he turns himself into some weird vampire thing. Not your traditional vampire, as Marvel likes to say. He's a vampire of science, which means there's going to be difference between Bram Stoker's ideas and what we have at the mighty Marvel House of Ideas. Hey, I could write this stuff. All right. Very fun. So the Lizard shows up, and then in the second issue, you actually have a fight between Lizard and Spider-Man until Kirk Connors kind of realizes who he is, and then they try to cure Morbius here as best they can, but things don't quite work out. All right, we get into, whoops, this is an extra length issue, I guess. All right, get into Marvel Team Up. Morbius has been thrown out to sea in this one, and then Spider-Man and the Human Torch team up and meet him again. He shows up, and that doesn't conclude until the next issue where the X-Men show up. And this is in that period kind of when the X-Men are in reprints in their own comics. So they show up here to deal with this Morbius threat and Spider-Man at the time until they realize kind of Spider-Man's a good guy. And little kidnappy Jean action. And lots of fun. Very interestingly, Peter Parker goes in for the kiss at the end of this one. Oh boy. All right, so that's your pretty standard 70s Marvel fun right there. The art is pretty much House Marvel style, and is pretty much the stories are just super fun stuff. But then you get into this Vampire Tales sort of magazine stuff, and this stuff is a lot darker. This isn't Comics Code approved or anything like that, and so it takes a drastic tone change. Now, this is a pretty short epic as it is. They put the covers in here. They put the table of contents in here. They put this intro for every single one of these issues before the stories, which, you know, it kind of feels like they fillered it out to kind of make it 400 pages. I'm not going to lie. So this feels like an epic that really is a lot shorter than a lot of the others because it really is. You don't get as much content. I enjoy reading this stuff. I've never read these Vampire Tales magazines, so I found this stuff pretty fun, this 70s pulp. Stuff that's going on. Now in this Morbius, it's by Steve Gerber and by Pablo Marcos on art, who does a beautiful job. I love this black and white art. It's pretty cool. And Steve Gerber writes the first few issues here. I found this very fun, and you kind of deal with Morbius as he ends up in this like Los Angeles area and gets involved with some weird demonic stuff. Lots of cheesecake looks there, but it's really nice to look at. Not gonna lie, enjoyable. And of course, they end with a bite, and you get these advertisements for the next issue. Again, it just feels a little bit like filler. We get another Giant Size Superheroes featuring Spider-Man, where we get back to sort of the standard deal. Gary Conway and Gil Kane, just a solid team right here. And this one, Morbius teams up with John Jameson as the Man-Wolf, and sort of takes control of his mind, but Peter Parker kind of figures it out there and solves it. And now Morbius ends up in a second deal. So you've got these Vampire Tales where Morbius has his own storyline going, and then Living Vampire in Adventure into Fear, where he has his own story also. And they have different tones, different writers, different sort of looks to them. This is Mike Friedrich and Paul Galassi on here for this one. And it's been about a week, so I'm hoping that I get the stories right. We go over his origin again. There's two different stories, as I said, and they get kind of odd. This one ends up with this girl who turns into like a like Red Sonja style lady, and I guess they flip back and forth in time or whatnot. It's kind of a very, very odd storyline as Morbius deals with this. And Morbius ends up in this like weird out of space and out of time spot where there's like this war going on between different factions, and these are all like 12, 16 issue or 16 page deals. Steve Gerber starts writing it again here, and we learn about this like evolution of this like alien planet, and he ends up in here, and they're bringing him in these cat people at one point to actually cull their population. And then he ends up down in some other spot where he's dealing with this like fantasy world in the next issue. Very bizarre because you get like this like Marvel universe at the beginning, then you get like this vampire, like traditional vampire story almost. It's really dark. Now you're into like weird fantasy and science with this. But I actually really thought this storyline was a lot of fun as Morbius is traveling through these worlds. He makes some friends and then ends up biting his friends sometimes. And goes back. I thought Steve Gerber did a really good job. This was really fun stuff. You get a little recap of what goes on. But there's this like evolutionary pattern these caretakers are trying to like cultivate basically as it is. Oddly, Blade ends up in this also when he gets back to Earth. They have a fight and then they kind of realize they're not each other's enemy and go. Kind of weird. And then it stops going into Vampire Tales. Now, Vampire Tales ends up with this like this sort of like occult thing where Morbius has this girlfriend who is getting hunted down by the occults and this like evil rituals and all that. And Morbius actually tries to save her from them and ends up fighting people across all of this. And you get some cool articles through here. Again, it's a little bit of filler, but it does the job. So now you get into this like, so you had that fantasy storyline going on. Now you get into this odd storyline with this occult, and then there's this like spider demon, and he ends up taking that down. I guess that's a nod to Spider-Man. Very, very wildly different tone here. And at some point, Don McGregor starts writing these, and Don McGregor's writing is a lot slower than Steve Gerber's. He really lays on the dialogue thick, as you can see on some of these pages here. And it got a little hard to read these at this point. You also have magazines that are shrunk down in size to fit these pages. That's kind of an odd thing as it is. There's an evil politician that he deals with. And then they end up going back in time to this like Old West situation, or maybe they just end up in an Old West town. They're living in this lighthouse for a while, Morbius and his little girlfriend here, and they get attacked. And this was a neat one where they ended up at a movie theater where there some occult rituals are going down. He's having to deal with that. I like the art pretty good in this. This is very solid, fun stuff. But like I said, the writing was really tough to read through this section of things. So it really made for what I thought was, you see that like you get all these you get probably 10 of these throughout the book. So like I said, a lot of filler stuff too. It's a beautiful double page spread. But you don't really feel like you're getting things going here. And here's the Western one I was mentioning before. And after this, he ends up parting ways with his lady because he doesn't want to bring her through this life or whatever it is. It's kind of odd. I guess it's a two-parter, so we'll have another one. But man, once I got finished with this, I was very happy to like at the beginning when it was the occult stuff and he had his like on the run situation. It was pretty good, and then once Don McGregor took over, it kind of just went downhill for me. So happy to get back into this now, and we get Doug Mensch for the last few issues here, who's also wordy, but I really like his writing quite a bit. And this is a conclusion to that story before. So if you remember, I mentioned the girl who was who could turn into this like adult Red Sonja kind of lady, blonde Sonja, whatever you want to call her. I forget her name. Whatever it is, Tara the Child, they call her in the book, and Tara the Woman. Very bizarre concept. And then she ends up turning into a really old woman at some point. I guess goes back and forth, and you kind of find out about her life and rebirth and death and all that stuff that goes on here. It's an interesting concept, for sure. The art is okay through here, but I mean the black and white art towards the beginning was pretty nice, and so it's a contrast in kind of like a lame way. And they end up concluding here. The 3-issue arc. This is kind of a funky layout. It didn't quite work out as she's changing. This is where the big reveal of her life cycle kind of comes about. This art really didn't work out. I mean, yeah. So, it is what it is. You know, you get a mixed bag with the epics, and with a couple different storylines going on. You just gotta roll with it. And we conclude this with a sort of a side vignette of Werewolf by Night, also written by Doug Mensch. And this is the best story towards the back of the book. The Werewolf by Night series is really good. So having that little crossover here was a lot of fun. He kind of realizes that the werewolf's not a bad dude, and ends up just leaving him alone. So that's the end of that. Like I said, 402 pages, but there's a lot of filler stuff, so you end up reading this pretty quick. Maybe there's 340 pages of real content in here, which is very short for an epic. The beginning's really strong. Those vampire tales start pretty strong, and then they kind of drop off in quality. The Adventures into Fear are pretty fun, but they're not up to the quality of like the beginning stuff or the Vampire Tales beginning stuff either. So it's all right. By the end of this, I was kind of glad to get done with it, but I'm also glad I read it because this is a very different thing compared to a lot of stuff in Marvel history. Now, how does this compare to like the Venom epic? The Venom epic is purely Spider-Man stuff that is just reprinted and labeled Red and Venom for the first issue. Whereas this, Morbius has this Vampire Tales and the other stuff going on, so it didn't feel like a Spider-Man book that happened to collect his appearances beyond the first one. So I'm actually glad I got this on that level, and I'm much more familiar with the character than I was before. So from a historical perspective, if you're interested in this character, it's a good read. I'd say it's like a 7.5 out of 10. It wasn't bad. But my average rating is a 7, so it was barely a little bit above what I'd consider an average decent read because of those early tales were so strong at the end of the day. All right, let me know what you think about this. I'll be back soon. Hit that like and subscribe button, and we'll see you soon.